What is good, all you cool cats and kittens, and welcome to week 11. What a banger week 10 was, especially the finish to Monday Night Football between Huge Dicka and Full Jerry. Man, with that Javonte Williams reception touchdown, I thought John pulled a rabbit out of the hat, was going to run away to victory, and the very fucking next drive, James Cook goes off for a scamper and takes the victory away, leaving Full Jerry with some massive blue balls. And Full Jerry now sitting at 5-5, while Huge Dick gets probably the biggest needle-moving win that he needed for his playoff race, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But man, that was week 10. What a fucking week. Let's get it right into our favorite of them all. We're going to go into the Nostradamus picks of the week from all you guys. All 10 of us participated this week, which is great to see again. Matchup number 1, 2 shots, no cup against Kevin. I really thought 2 shots, no cup coming into this would have had a chance had Joshua Dobbs not really had the opportunity in week 9 and pulled off the heroic efforts. Because I felt like that rookie Hall was off to a pretty good first drive. And I thought 2 shots, no cup might have had a starting quarterback for the rest of the season. But alas, Dobbs does what Dobbs does, and 2 shots, no cup was left without that impact and ended up losing to Kevin. It was actually pretty close for a little bit. But Kevin Yip ended up pulling this out, especially on the backs of Devin Singletary, who finished with really high-performing 22-point output. But in terms of the picks, everyone got this one right. That moves 2 shots, no cup, still winless, 10 losses down, and Kevin moves up tied at 6th right now, man. This guy continues to stay in the picture for the playoffs at 4-6. All right, moving over to matchup number 2 is Trust the Process against Mr. Ambassador here. And same thing, we got all of us picking this one right. Trust the Process staying undefeated at 10-0 with another league high in terms of points for at 159 and change. Sergey now moves to a sole 9th in the league. Matchup number 3, moving over to this matchup, we got Brady Stir Dynasty against Wooksy Fingerhold. Was not really that dramatic, although it did start off pretty slow for Brady Stir Dynasty, but seeing Jamar Chase come to work, I thought this was great. This week in particular, compared to last video, I was mentioning if Jamar Chase really is healthy and is able to produce the numbers that we all know that he can, and then be able to replace what he had as Tyreek's value, and if we can find another wide receiver, obviously T. Higgins didn't play this week, but if we can find another flex position that can replace at least what Jamar Chase was doing when Joe Burrow was struggling, I felt like the CJ Stroud acquisition was just all pure upside for him. And alas, here it is. He had CJ Stroud going off for 19 points, and combined with Russell Wilson, they scored just under 38 points together. It's a massive boost to his average points for total average coming from his QB1 and QB2 positions. So great to see, and great to see that the immediate post-trade week, we're seeing the impacts of what CJ Stroud and Jamar Chase was able to do. So if Brady Third Dynasty stays strong, this is going to be reflective of the type of outings that we can expect from Brady Third Dynasty week in and week out. And the 149 was right within that 50 percentile range of the estimations from last week's recap. So great to see that going to work as well. So Brady Third Dynasty moves up to a sole 4th in the league now at 6-3, still very much in play for the second bye week as well. Moving over to matchup number 4, I had this as sort of the undercard of the Commissioner Pick'ems matchups. Full Jerry, Huge Dicka. Like I said in the opening slide, man, this was probably got to be the best dramatic finish we've ever had in CCK history. So this was great to see. Going into this, Full Jerry, I believe, was down 13 points on the projected points for. I just felt like Javonte Williams was going to be due for a big game, and he did. It went off for almost 20 points and almost sealed Full Jerry the victory if it wasn't for Huge Dicka and James Cook just really making that, not even dramatic to be honest, just the very, very next drive, almost immediately the very next play, if not the very next play, to really take that back from him. But what a fun matchup, and you know, 7 of us got this one right. But man, this could have absolutely been an upset in terms of Nostradamus picks. That said, I was a little surprised that this was 7-3 in favor of Huge Dicka, because I thought this would have been closer to 5-5, or if not in favor of Full Jerry, with the way that Full Jerry's been playing recently. But that just means respect for Huge Dicka that the rest of the league has for him, and good for Huge Dicka to really come out of this with the victory. As I said in the midseason report, this matchup between Huge Dicka and Full Jerry was going to have the biggest needle-moving impact in terms of Huge Dicka's playoff probability, while not necessarily impacting Full Jerry that much. So really no impact to Full Jerry in terms of his playoff, and we'll see. Obviously his percentages dropped because there's obviously a small sliver window that Full Jerry doesn't make it, which is likely not the case. But you know, in the end, Huge Dicka really gets the big boost to his playoff probability. That's his 3rd straight. Back at it, gentlemen, from a 1-6. Is that right? 1-6, I guess, was the play. Maybe I have that wrong. But Huge Dicka is certainly now tied 6th with Wooksy and Kevin at 6th going into the remaining 3 weeks of the season. All right, so moving over to matchup number 5. This was the main event of them all between Bills Mafia and Moncton Meerkats. 2 teams that came in ranked in the 2nd and 3rd in the power rankings. I said you can interchange them one or the other, and it was the result of this week that was going to solidify my power rankings for likely the rest of the season. And Moncton Meerkats pulls off the very needed victory here that he needed to be in the commanding seat, the driver's seat for the 2nd seed, and thus the first week of the playoff bye. He's in a commanding situation now, and we'll talk about these races along with the 2nd seed as well as the 6th seed race that's happening in a little bit. But this was closer than I thought. But especially with Bills Mafia not being able to rely on Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, this is a lot closer than I thought. But Moncton Meerkat certainly pulls off the needed victory here and moves up to 7-3 and now tied 2nd, but beating the tiebreaker against Bills Mafia. All right, so that does it for the matchups. And here's the Nostradamus tally to date, guys. So we have Trust the Process leading at 42. We got Kyle at 2nd, sitting at 41. And we got Ryan at 3rd by himself, sitting at 40. Still anyone's game. Very doable. Each week there's a swing of about 1 to maybe 2 points on one side or the other. So there's very much a race that's tight. We got 3 more weeks of pick'ems left. And I think this is going to be the one. A race that we're going to be continues to be close throughout the rest of the season. All right, so that brings it to my favorite section, right? The contender power rankings. We are no longer calling this the season power rankings. It is no longer necessarily based on the playoff odds, but although it is based for the 6th seed, but it's purely based on what I think is the contender likelihood of you winning it all this season, based on the trades to date, based on the performance to date, based on the records that you have. And we're going to start with, instead of reviewing all of this all at once, I do want to start off with 2 races that we're obviously focused about, which is going to be 2nd seed and coming with the playoff bye. And we're going to focus on this, and we'll focus on the 6th seed in a little bit. So looking at this, the reality is that it's going to be based on these 2. Obviously, Ryan still technically has a theoretical chance to get in. I do think the race is going to be tight here, especially because of the points for advantage that Moncton Meerkats has over Brady Stewart Dynasty. So I think regardless, it's going to end up coming to these 2 teams. So this is their schedule for the remaining 4 weeks, and sort of like looking at it a little bit deeper. Interesting, you can cancel out their next 2 weeks together because they're facing the same exact opponents, and both teams are going to be heavily favored to win those. So let's say heading into week 13, they're going to be now sitting at 9-3 heading into week 13 with 2 games left to play. That's where the discrepancy starts to sort of come in. So on one side, out of the 4 matchups that they have to face, the argument can be made that Bills Mafia has the hardest as well as the easiest of those 4 matchups between the 2 managers, while Moncton Meerkats faces the middle groups between Huge Dicka and Full Jerry. Obviously, as we've seen with what Huge Dicka is doing and the points for that he's been outputting over the last couple of weeks, along with what we've seen Full Jerry be able to do, those are not guaranteed wins by any means. I think it's going to be a very tight matchup. But we do have Bills Mafia at week 13 against Trust the Mafia, and then against Mr. Ambassador in week 14. So sort of talking about this, the tiebreaker right now is obviously going to continue to be on points for, Monty Meerkats has an advantage of 198 points after week 10 against Bills Mafia. So the tiebreaker is all but guaranteed for Monty Meerkats to come. So it basically means that for Monty Meerkats to get in, all he has to do is finish out and match the rest of the season record that Bills Mafia would have, which right now I think for both of them, you can consider a 4-and-out for all of them winning out. That's also in play. But if you think about the 3-and-1 play potentially, I think that's sort of where it's out. I think, again, winning out for both of the managers are still in play. But right now, where things stand, even if the win out is done, I think Monty Meerkats also has the same probability of winning out as much as Bills Mafia does, for example, especially because week 13, I'm going to be without my top 2 quarterbacks. So I'm going to have to rely on Kyler Murray in terms of what he's able to give me. He looked good in week 10, but who knows how he's going to be able to perform in that week. And I'm going to have to rely on a backup quarterback at the QB2 position. So I'm severely going to be hampered in terms of what I can expect. So obviously still that's not a easy matchup per se, but that's still going to be the hardest. So I think the odds of them getting to the same record is about similar, as well as their record of getting to the same wins is about similar. So right now, due to the tiebreaker scenario, I do have Moncton Meerkats as 75% probability of getting and securing that second seed in the first week playoff bye. But I think this race will probably be addressed in week 13, depending on what happens. I think if Brandon loses to trust the process in week 13, this is going to swing 90% on Moncton Meerkats, assuming that they went 2-0 in the next 2 weeks. But if Brandon wins out on week 13, then I think it starts to get into that 60-40 territory heading in favor of Moncton Meerkats heading into week 14, just because of the more likely probability of Bills Mafia winning week 14 versus Moncton Meerkats. Even though he is going to be favored in week 14 against Full Jerry, just the difficulty of the matchup compared to Bills Mafia having to go against Mr. Ambassador that week. So week 13 is going to be the race to watch for the second seed and the final playoff bye. All right, so let's move over into the race for the 6th seed. This is Huge Dicka and Wooksie's race to lose. That's how I'm thinking about it. I also note here that I'm not including Kevin in this because even though he is currently tied at 6th, he would have to have 2 more wins for the rest of his wins. So he has to go 2-2 to get into a chance to get a tiebreaker into the playoffs, or for him to beat because of the tiebreaker. But he's also facing his hardest gauntlet, which is Moncton Meerkats, Bills Mafia, and Brady Stir Dynasty over the next 3 weeks before meeting Wooksie in 14. So, I think 1 and 3 is the most likely outcome or most potential high upside outcome. But even at that point, he's definitely going to be losing out on tiebreakers to Huge Dicka regardless. So I think that's why I'm not including Kevin Yip here. But if Kevin happens to pull off another upset victory against one of those 3 managers like he did against Brady Stir Dynasty, I believe in week 6, he did beat Brady Stir Dynasty then. So if he's able to complete the sweep, then we might be looking at a scenario where Kevin might end up having the driver's seat come playoff time. Provided that he beats Wooksy in week 14. So that just means that if he pulls off an upset over the next 3 weeks against the gauntlet of the schedule that he has, week 14 is going to be a fascinating matchup for all of us to take a look at. But anyways, highlighting these 2 managers, like I said, Huge Dicka pulled off a massive needle-moving win against Full Jerry in week 10. And you'll see reflected in power rankings. He now just basically needs to tie Wooksy's rest of the season record to get into playoffs because he's going to likely win the tiebreaker. There's no scenario that Wooksy Fingerhold is going to be beating Huge Dicka on the tiebreakers at this point. So looking across this, though, the front runner is now Huge Dicka for the 6th seed, but it's still a coin flip. Even though Huge Dicka's team is considerably much better on paper in terms of the points for that we're seeing, the reason why it's a coin flip is because of the rest of the schedule here. Is Huge Dicka's got a very winnable matchup this week in week 11, but he's got a gauntlet of schedule to finish out the season, whereas Wooksy Fingerhold might end up finding that he's a game behind going into week 12, but he's going to have 3 of the easiest schedule that he's had throughout the rest of the season, or for this season, for him to close out this season in Mr. Ambassador, Tushar Snokov, and Kevin Yip. So this is going to be interesting. But because Wooksy beat Full Jerry in week 9, this is no longer about a 5-win territory anymore because Wooksy definitely has paths to get into again 6 wins, whereas I don't really see Huge Dicka having a really easy way to get into 6 wins at this point, even though he pulled off the upset. That not to say with the way that Huge Dick has been playing, obviously he's going as a gauntlet, but he certainly can beat any of those 3 teams in any given week, especially if he continues to put top 2 like points for like he did in week 10. So that's, or at least the top 4 type of outing that he did in week 10. So this race is going to be something that's close to the end, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens if Travis or Wooksy end up making more moves ahead of the week 12 trade deadline to sort of have the managers be able to design themselves into their preferred route of outcomes even more. All right, so all that said, here are the power rankings for week 11, boys. So we got number 1 staying the same, and we got Moncton Meerkats moving up a spot after the defeat of Bills Mafia. And the same reason that I said yesterday, I think both of these teams are stellar, and any of the top 3 teams you can put in there in terms of their likelihood to win it all. The only reason I have Moncton Meerkats here, his path to winning it all is just going to be 2 games, most likely, because of the tiebreaker and all the scenarios that I talked about, him likely getting the 2nd seed. So because he's the favorite to get that 2nd seed now, I have to move him up to number 2. And Bills Mafia falls to number 3. And we got no movements in Braced or Dynasty and Full Jerry, but we do have Huge Dicka moving up a spot. Now, pulling from the Fantasy Pros numbers, we got Full Jerry moving down 5% to 94%, so still very much a shoe-in for the playoffs. But we got Huge Dicka now at 52%. That's an increase of 10%. So like I said, the biggest swing that he could have imagined happening in week 10 for him was to beat Full Jerry, and there he is. That's the impact. That's 10% boost for him. And we got Wooksy Fingerhold because of Travis's impact, moving down 7. And we got Kevin moving up 1% because he did pull off that win, now technically tied at 6th. And we got Mr. Ambassador being detrimented by the rest of the league's results and moving down 3%. So basically out of the playoffs now. The race, like I said, is very much a 2-man race between Huge Dicka and Wooksy Fingerhold. And the top 2 is basically the race between Moncton Americans and Bills Mafia. Exciting wrapping up the season. I love that we have multiple races for this season to close out. So that does it, boys, for the week 10 recap. Love the energy that we saw on Monday Night Football. Good luck rest of the season, and certainly good luck in week 10. That's it. See ya.